And looking at 11:30. Murat started with a cav charge up here. It was countercharged, didn't have much effect. It's kind of a stasis, but they gave me screen to move my units up and to pull Soul's forces, slowly trickling down. For the main line, we're trying to kind of create something that looks a little bit more rational here, which maybe doesn't make much sense because we're basically pursuing the Prussians for the most part across here. But I also kind of want to not overrun my ranges, and most importantly, it ends up looking this way because Soul is trying to focus better on his orders, which we're focused on here. Even though I've got a lot of units, they're not going to make it very quickly. Lan is kind of stymied by this cav here. I didn't move these guys. I got to move them. I don't know where they're going to go. Probably high diddle up the middle. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Do I want to get them any closer? Yeah, because they got good range on them. 6. Okay. And that puts me in a position to start challenging that cav if need be. The Prussians still have a fair amount of cav back in this sort of in the center of their line, which is why the French need to either coordinate with that or not advance on the center, except by square. So what do we have? Aguilera here. Wasn't really, he's also stymied by some cav. Now, this is the other place I threw a cav charge in, but the French got beaten back there, and I just inching my way up because it's not light cav, so I don't have to worry about the range on the counter charges. From what my take on the rules, I can't throw skirmishers into there, and I'm really not, since the only thing that's up there is cav, I'm really not worried about skirmishers on that side of things. Ney and the guard taking up, well, the guard is taking up its position, and it can rest for a while. I might send it some other orders to go find some place to squat that's more useful than that. Napoleon's actually rallying forces. Ney's orders are to get over here and then kind of go into a reserve type situation. He needs some rest, so I'd like that. I might be able to swap him in with for a different corps. Davout, well, he's trying to organize his defense much better. However, it's taking some time to develop, so you have like unit and column here, some artillery without infantry to back it up, and trying to rally my units, but also taking advantage of where some infantry and column got out in front of things in a way that they really shouldn't have. And I think that puts me to firing. I'm unfortunately, there's things falling on my house, just branches and stuff, but it made it hard to fall asleep, and I'm just like, well, if I can't sleep during a windstorm, I might as well come up here and do some of this instead of fucking around on the computer for another hour. There's a lot happening on either battlefield in terms of impressive actions. We had some fire exchanged here, but nothing really collapsed. Kind of impressed with the Prussians' ability to hold up there. Those aren't their best units. They've got a bunch of grenadiers up here. Keep running into them. If you look at Hohenloh's army, there's just a whole bunch of them. This column, von Pritzwitz. And we had a few show up. Oh, these are from the other army. We have a few grenadiers in the other army, but they're concentrated in this one, and I'm hitting them. We did blow up a unit here. I think it got blown out. Maybe it's this guy running away. I don't know. And the biggest thing that the French managed was to rally a bunch of units, especially with Lan's corps. He's down to like one routing cav there. We got some guys up towards the front who, well, not routing, disordered, who were disordered recently and aren't eligible to rally. But otherwise, yeah, we're largely getting things under control here. And I would like to slow down the cost of advance, for the French army, which is easy. I'm in contact with the enemy. Being in contact with the enemy means I'm not marching, as long as I don't melee. Something which Murat actually avoided having to do because he wasn't the attacker. He declared a charge, it got countercharged. That obviates his cost for it somehow. I don't know. It's really hard to justify. It all kind of works, but when you start looking at it too closely, you're like, yeah, I'm not so sure why. The pieces don't represent what they should represent, the pieces of the system, but they hold together well enough that allows you to do the thing that I find that's important, which is to run a written order system that feels generally Napoleonic. It's not as detailed as some of the others, NBS in particular, in terms of another one with the orders, but, obviously not as detailed as Labatt. But it's also at a level of detail that puts it above, the systems, the Napoleon at Waterloo derivatives, which try to add a lot of stuff on them. But man, to me, that just feels like, I don't know, putting lipstick on a pig is what I want to say. But yeah, and the same thing, although a little bit more detailed, the same thing with the Berg system. Again, I don't think I've played the Waterloo one of it, but I played like Borodino, and I don't know if there are others. And I know the Civil War one, where it's relying mainly on chit pull to try to give a little bit more access. I don't remember how Cav works in that system. I thought I had a... Wow. I want to say I thought I had something like WoW, not WoW, Aspirin Essling, the big battle there. I thought I had another one in this series. See, but the Napoleonic stuff comes over here. And it's dark in there, scary dark. Yeah, that's why I didn't put games back there originally, and now, I stuffed them in there because I'm like, oh, that's a good space for it. It increases my coverage there. It's not like I'm really starving for space, but I don't want to clutter this up too much, especially after the mold issue that happened back here. And I just haven't been able to organize anything. Like, I did the reorg that got me back there and got me these up here, but I didn't really, and I mean, technically I have room there if I get some of these empty boxes out. Those empty boxes and those over there were intended to hold more games, but I just haven't been able, for the past couple of years since the mold thing, haven't been able to convince myself to really do the reorg that I need to. It was easier with everything on shelves. These are kind of hard to get things in and out of, and there's stooping and all that. So it's not a big deal when you're picking, hey, I want to play this game, pulling it out and then putting it back. It is a big deal when I have to reorganize everything, and so I don't know. But unless I get low shelves, they don't really work here, and I don't know what shipping situations are. When I bought my shelves at IKEA, it was back when I had a van still. I guess I could rent a vehicle, but again, that starts getting stupid. I know they do deliver stuff. I had stuff delivered. I think the second time I bought things, I had a couple things delivered or something. I don't know. Something that has me worried. tarp, I kind of had it set up in a more jury-rigged fashion than the previous one that tore. It gave way, whatever, some of the sticks I have holding it up or whatever. And this is how, when I moved in it was, but I'm trying to keep jury-rigging the jury-rigging to make it hold together, because I can't get anyone to come in and put something more permanent in. But I think it gave way and I heard this big splash. I don't know, either that or somebody drove through the street. Because there's a lot of rain coming down right now and the street might be a flood. Okay, so what do we have going on? Prussians trying to maintain an attack here, but in a little bit of a bind. I don't want... Wilhelm actually is in command now, to, overtax the fatigue levels. The fatigue levels are an optional rule, but they add so much to the game. However, they may add too much to the game. They really make the brittleness of the Prussians even more... Well, the brittleness of the Prussians wouldn't exist without it. Let's put it that way. What they'd have is really, really big and hard to maneuver formations, but they wouldn't be as easy to break. The fatigue rules make them maybe too easy to break, but that's probably the biggest advantage that Davout has in this condition, because he's outnumbered, not necessarily that much of a better quality on the troop per troop basis. He's just got a better commands ratings, but that doesn't really help much, because he's not, he's giving orders the same way Wilhelm is. Speedier troops, no question, but the big thing in his favor is if you play with those fatigue rules, the Prussians have a hell of a hard time rallying all this shit. It's not like Davout's having an easy time, but it's a little bit easier because he's outnumbered. The numbers don't count as much when there aren't leaders to back them up. So not a lot changing there. I did not launch any cav attacks. Didn't seem to make sense here. I wanted to make some movement here. I'll think about that again. I'm in this worry about the possible damage. Over here, Hohenlohe wrote commands that don't take place yet to pull back to a line over here. Remember, he has to protect this for his reinforcements, but he has to protect that side so that he can get off the map and maybe influence the battle over at Auerstaedt. And I don't know what that does to the victory conditions, because units that are withdrawn don't count towards destruction, so you could actually withdraw enough units, I don't know when the withdrawal happens, but you could withdraw enough units at some point where it no longer is possible to break your army. Again, this might be a fuzzy situation, but let's see. Oh no, this isn't the one that allows you. So this one doesn't allow you to withdraw units normally. But the overall scenario is break the whole army. That didn't happen historically, as far as I understand. I don't think Davout was able to do enough damage to the main army, in addition to the rout at Jena, to be able to count the whole army as being routed. That's the combined scenario victory conditions for the ahistorical modified situations. Jena itself is destroy the army at Jena. Well, we're maybe going to have to say we can't assess victory conditions as a game, but we can look at what the situation is and what the success was. Overall, I would say for the campaign, France was successful, but they didn't get the ultimate goal that's in that ahistorical scenario, because I don't believe they would have met the qualifications for destroying that main army. They routed it, they won the battlefield, they won both battlefields. In game terms, that's not enough, but playing each game separately, they won them both. So I don't know what that means and how that's going to modify into what I'm trying to do. So over here we had some definite problems. First of all, trying to run away from places where there's fire. We got some routing coming out of that. We got a couple more units destroyed that went into the sin bin or whatever you want to call it there. And Hohenlohe has almost nothing holding up. This charge here, I don't know if I talked about. Yeah, I don't think I did. I'm having to use Prussian. They look Austrian. They're from the same. They're the same color as the Austrian ones, whereas the Prussian units aren't quite the same color. Prussian markers for the squares, because I'm out of square markers. Unlike skirmishers, squares are going to be kind of tough to use something else for unless I dig into certain specific games that I know. Maybe I could use, I've got a fair number of counters that are divided. Might have some in here even that I'm using, but that are printed half one color, half another. Old counter sheets, this was often the case. They would do the printing. They would print an in-between. There would be an in-between two colors blank counter that would be divided in half, and those would actually suffice probably pretty well. Although it starts making the game look uglier and uglier the same way these things do. Certainly if I had a nice means of cutting these without too much work, yeah, that would definitely be a solution, and it would actually look pretty good because the skirmishers wouldn't look like they're taking up a whole hex the way they are. But unfortunately, that's not how the game was laser cut or was perforated. So whatever. But yeah, things are, the Prussian army here at Jena is definitely reeling. I'm looking forward to getting some reinforcements as I try to fall back. And as those reinforcements come in, defending this side of things becomes less and less important. Unfortunately, Hohenlohe has this fatigue issue. He's at level 1+1 fatigue, which means, oh no, this is him. No, he's just at level 1 fatigue, which, you know, means moving full is going to just further weaken the army. I do have a few turns before I get up to level 2 fatigue, but you know, the French have a lot of opportunity to rest a corps, a couple, and you can get 2 fatigue points back for a full rest. So, you know, the problem the French have had is they've got reinforcements coming on and can't afford to do a rest, both because units are just continually marching. Another thing is the fatigue rules, although I seem to remember there was something in the notes that had reinforcing units come in with fatigue. But yeah, if you don't have that in play, you're not taking into account the fact that maybe units were marching hard to get to the battlefield. I haven't seen that in either of these scenarios, but I seem to remember noting it somewhere. I don't know. But the question there is, without knowing how hard the units were marching to get to the battlefield, that's going to be difficult. Maybe Bernadotte is coming in with fatigue or something. I don't know. Anyway, although he certainly took his time, so I don't know. It wasn't what I expected. It wasn't the new tarp. But I looked out at the street and there wasn't much water there. So I checked my old tarp, and something that I had to have that kind of patched together, apparently that one finally ripped and gave way. I'll figure something else out. Worst comes to worst, that's a huge one, and I'm not going to replace it. But it does provide some shelter for like my ladder and some porch furniture and stuff like that. So I'll probably try to keep that together or put a smaller one in again for that. But wow. All right, back to the game. I'm stuck with a software upgrade, so I may I don't know what's going on. I had to look at the artillery roll because I've got kind of a weird situation, and I got to tell you, this one bothers me more than the fatigue one. The fatigue one has maybe more impact on play, but this one weirds me out. This is one of those, I don't think this is working right. So when you play with the artillery, you're playing with either half losses or a 50-50 chance of losses being real. I don't find the half losses particularly worse than the 50-50 because I have to do lookups on artillery fire no matter what. I've got situations where I've got artillery stacked on top of infantry. For either player, there might be an advantage to switching that stacking so that I get the heavy infantry fire that's at full effect instead of artillery fire, which is a little funky, right? Because so it wouldn't make sense for the Prussian. The thing is, it doesn't make sense for either player to do this on their own turn, and that's the only time they can do it. Because, for example, if the Prussians put the infantry on top, well, then their infantry would take the full fire of the artillery, which is heavier at range 1, at any range really, than the infantry fire is. But then they'd be able to fire back and have full effect on the artillery. And it's kind of like a six half dozen type issue there, where if you're making that choice, either way might make sense, but there's no clear advantage. There would be a clear advantage if the defender could restack, right? Because they get first fire. But because they can't, I'm just leaving it with the artillery on top, try to pling, those off. But here's the thing. Their argument for not being able to hit the artillery easily has to do with density and no ricochet and stuff like that. Well, the truth of the matter is, short-range fire is probably grape. Most systems do not penalize counter-battery fire at close range. And here, this game just penalizes it across the board. Which is more accurate? I don't know. I'm not an expert enough to argue that. But I can say the preponderance of games make a distinguishment, and the feeling here is that to make things easier, even this advanced rule doesn't make that distinguishment that other games just make in their basic rules. Now, maybe the designer has their reasons for choosing that, but it does seem at odds with the majority of designs, and I don't see anything that kind of argues against that. Of course, most of the notes, not all, are in the back, and I've read them. I will always read those, not like playthroughs. I consider the designer's notes an absolutely vital thing, much more valuable than, like an example of play, an extended example of play or something like that. But because they give you an idea of what the designer is really trying to represent with their decisions, and understanding what the intention is absolutely vital to me, but to understanding the game. Whereas looking at some sample of play that may show one path, and doesn't show everything, and really you're working through a lot of stuff that should be explained well in the rules, and that luckily that doesn't exist here. I'm not going to say luckily because the rules are fuzzy enough that maybe it could get some advantage out of it, but to me that's always a really lazy way to write rules. This is a lazy way to write rules too, but without the example play to help nail them down. I prefer this because having to hunt through examples of play to try to see if they show that the way the rules are written is wrong, or the ambiguity in the rules can be cleared up there. To me, that's just a horrendous thing, and some people will take that burden, and then I feel, like I've not done enough work on the rules because I didn't read this stupid example of play because the designer didn't want to write the rules clearly enough. I would rather the rules just be ambiguous and there be no solution to it. And then, there's still this possible problem of, well, did you go look to see if there was a question? No, give me the printed errata when I buy the game, or don't, whatever. Or keep track of me and keep me up to date on it or something. But I'm okay making stuff up. Anyway, the artillery thing was really what I wanted to bring up in addition to my water issues. Yeah, I started fire and I got lost somewhere. At the end of the Prussian turn, we're beginning to see, the hull increasing over here. The next turn's order is going to make things look a little better, I hope. But so many disordered and a couple of rounded units. The Cav here failed to hurt the disordered units, both rout away, or both disorder away. That's a pity, because if I had gotten anything other than a 0, if I got a disorder or whatever, but this Cav unit was down to 1 step, so it's not very potent. And over here, we had interesting situations too, where basically the artillery, we've got guns facing each other with no crew, and the infantry that were backing them up both ran away. It's very easy to make that infantry run away. Again, this is kind of weird. The gun fails a morale check when it's being targeted. Well, the infantry ends up getting a possible disorder check. Well, ends up getting a disorder check from that, and a possible disorder. Very possible, because it's got a -2 on it for the guns running. I don't know what that means. Again, it feels kind of weird, but that may be okay. My feeling here is you're targeting the guns. The regular infantry is not taking much loss. They're not going to break. But it may simulate some of the spread fire, etc., without actually recording casualties, which would also be happening, especially since casualties are stragglers. So I don't know. It's just all kind of weird. Not much success in rallying on either front of things, and that gets us to the noon turn. We're running out of number counters. So I'm going to have to reset over there. And I believe Ruschel and his corps come in at this point. And that's a big set of reserves for Napoleon to deal with over on his front. I mean, it looks like he's broken the Prussian army. Well, Hohenlohe's corps. Hohenlohe's huge, unwieldy corps. Ruschel's isn't, that small either. These are a little bigger than, even the smaller corps tend to be a little bigger than the French corps, at least in terms of counters, which is where your scope of command really lies. Although, if they're small counters, you can stack them, but that doesn't really give you anything. You don't get more firepower out of having 2 units stacked, which also feels a little weird. It's like, seriously, I couldn't have frontage from 2 units split across the hex if they're small, but again, there's weird things in this system that are just kind of like, I don't know how much I buy any of this. Again, I like the NBS, which says this much fire can come out of a hex, and that's it, and you're allowed to stack more than the firepower to indicate, that you've got more depth to your formations. But Yeah, with this, you're not allowed to split the frontage of an individual hex. So basically, everything, if you have multiple units in a hex, they're in column, essentially. Yeah. Davout is definitely being pressed more, but, and there's more reinforcements coming, but the fragility of the Prussian army here may be enough that he has the ability to turn this around. Right then, a couple of preparatory cav charges. One was here, where I think we broke the Prussian cav, but then rather than sit within the firing range of some artillery, we blew our cav. The other one up here, where we broke the Prussian cav, but took a casualty. The Prussians didn't take a casualty. It's kind of a hard result. Which is better, which is worse? Given the fragility of the Prussian army, its difficulty of rallying units, I'm going to say the casualty is not as big a deal as the disorder. But that seems weird. Like, that's not how most games represent things usually, or that's not the outcome of most games systems. Because usually a casualty is a painful thing. And it is, you know. We lost some cav strength in this. And a unit is closer to being permanently destroyed and whatever. But these might be gone forever too. You know, we've got so many disordered units that we're having trouble maintaining a force. Maybe when Ruschel comes in, he'll be able to cover for them. But all told, Hohenloh's not going to succeed in rallying all of these. And all these disordered units might well find themselves facing certain issues with as the French close in on them. Got to be careful, though. There's still enough cav available that an advance against these units is not trivial. The best answer is probably to deploy some artillery. This is a light cav. This one's not. Deploy some artillery 2 to 3 hexes back, and just, you know, try to get what we can out of them and push forward. Didn't see any cav action over here. The French have an opportunity. They could try to, you know, knock this out. But again, it's not really useful to to try to knock out a cav defensively. You know, it's a crapshoot what happens in a cav charge, and I need this to defend my line. It's up to the Prussians to knock out my countercharge capability, and they might fail. If they charge me and I countercharge, I might knock them back and still be prepared for another countercharge if the infantry moves up. So it's really an offensive arm meant to, like, well, okay. Cavalry is most effective, I think, on defense because of that countercharge capability. That countercharge capability is really, really dangerous to advancing infantry. So you need cavalry to neutralize the enemy cav, but that's not a sure thing. But using the cav to try to knock out an attacker's cav during your own turn doesn't really serve you the same kind of purpose. You use up your charge, you may end up under, you know, in range where guns can turn and screw with you. Of course, you can blow your cav, but that throws another unit into disorder. And the fatigue levels make the rally chance a little lower. But the rally chance is lowered anyway. You know, so this is an 8. A disordered cav has a morale of 6, so it may fail its rallies. On average, it will. It will probably eventually succeed before it gets off board, but you're not guaranteed. So your first chance to rally, if you blow your cav, is the next turn. But if your chances aren't that good, it may not be a worthwhile choice to make. Not seeing any cav over here that can do anything about the disordered Prussians. But we've got infantry that can chase them down. There's really no defense for the Prussians there. So we'll start the attacks over here. Doing our slow push. There's almost nothing, just the cav defending here. We drove this unit that was in a hellish position out. But not really pressing this too much is the whole thing, which may turn out to be bad because Reuchel's coming on, I think, from that side. No, from down here again. So there's more forces coming into play for Hohenlohe, and he's got his orders coming in, which is going to cause some disruption because Soule is going to try to swing this way. That might end up trapping these guys. Might not, you know. And actually, Lahn has the same kind of orders to come around. So we could well see Hohenlohe's force divided into two sections that, like, there's just no way for him to command that. And trouble with withdrawing too slowly, I guess. And then over here at Auerstaedt, not much more of excitement. Rally-wise, you know, it's a slow process. One thing we got to keep in mind, disordered units don't have to be rallied. So if they start coming close to where, you know, if they get to where they're going to fall off the edge of the map, I don't want to rally them. What I want to do is wait until my leader can get back there and do so. Although with Davout, that's problematic because he has to keep his command in command. You know, over on this side, I've got one loose guy, Napoleon, who can run around and try to, you know, turn things around with units like this. Of course, it starts doing that, and that gets me into a conflict with whether or not I want to issue orders. Now, Napoleon can issue his written orders or whatever, and they got a fair chance of getting accepted. And it's probably worth stopping a routing unit, even if it means that my orders are going to be implemented a little bit more slowly because of that. Because, well, see, the problem is the Lahn and Soule command swinging this way. They may be going in the wrong direction. You know, I may be more interested in heading this way, but I think a couple of corps in that direction. We have Augereau definitely trying to get to Hermstedt. Ney could use the rest. The guards. Throwing the guards in is dangerous, as far as I can tell, so, or should be. The way I'm implementing the rules, it's going to mean a couple of a couple point morale penalty for everything if I do it before the French army looks like it's going to break. So the only way to do it otherwise would be, hey, the whole Prussian army is ready to lose, and if I can just make that extra push, it's worth it. They'd have to be in the right place at the right time for that to work. But I can semi-commit them, which is to say, go to a location that causes the Prussians problems that I'm there. And then, you know, the Prussians probably don't want to fight them and may desperately try to change orders to avoid that kind of situation. But, you know, if they're parked here or something, that could cause some significant difficulty, even here. So we'll see what we do with that. We got some Prussian reinforcements coming in with Rachel. Alrighty. So Hohenlohe's Prussians are trying their damnedest to break out of the battle and pull back. Technically, I guess I'm covering my orders. I'm trying to cover this. The disordered units and the routed units are fleeing towards various exits because they're in too much danger if they stick around. Disordered units are just pretty much dead. They'd end up routed. They'd be harder to rally, and although not all that much harder, but they'd be forced to flee at higher speeds. And this engagement is the particularly tricky one, although there was some gunfire from artillery back here, because we're kind of pressed by Soul's force. And we're going to see how the orders kind of work together. This is going to work out pretty well for the French, I think. Not sure, but just they're going for so many geographic objectives in such a way that they're going to divide Hohenlohe's forces, and Ruchel's forces are going to be also divided from where Hohenlohe's command area is, for whatever that matters. Over here, Wilhelm is continuing his attack. We launched a charge, failed a countercharge, so some squares were formed. That meant everything marched forward, and his forces are getting close to fatigue. Our Mr. K coming in over here, I think is going to try to take the left side of the woods and focus Wilhelm's main army portion, the old Brunswick Corps, against the French left, but on his own right, just because it's painful to command such a broad swath. And I guess we start rolling some shots. Over here on this side, everything is out of fire range. Well, yeah, I think everything's out of fire range. I don't know. I'll check the artillery. There might be some long-range artillery pieces. I know some of them go out to like range 7. I don't much. I mean, those are going to be plinks on the one chart, but that's not bad. That's more or less what we were getting out of this whole wing here. So, and now it's unleashed and can come out and play. Warriors. The reason I picked up the camera though is this little 2-step unit. It just took a hit. Fine. It's holding its, a decent unit, whatever. But the victory conditions for the campaign or for the Jena map involve destruction of units, as far as I can tell. It's not well spelled out, but it's the only sensible interpretation that I can figure out. So I have to go with it. For victory, for determining, hey, who wins, whatever. Yeah, let's just stumble and throw some word salad out. But the problem with that is there's these little units that, you kind of don't even want to engage. And that creates I don't know, what feels like a false sort of rationale. Oh no, it's not like they're an elite unit necessarily, although this thing probably is 005. It's a grenadier unit, and a lot of the smaller units actually are. But it doesn't matter how big or small a unit is for the victory condition situation. So engaging with this grenadier as opposed to a larger one or whatever is kind of a negative factor, and you'd rather keep this guy in the line, in a place in the line where it wouldn't really be as likely to get hit. And I just feel like that creates false decision making. Also, the tiny size of units, which, yeah, it's as apparent as anything else in this game, but it's not as apparent as it is in the games I usually play. Let's say the Great Battles of American Civil War, the TSS aligned stuff, or the NBS aligned stuff, where the size of the unit is actually pretty damn clear looking at it on the board. The value on the counters is a larger value because less numbers are present on the counter. So it's very, very easy to see, oh, wow, that's a pretty dinky unit. My line is not as strong there as it should be. I had better throw some reinforcements in or whatever. Here, that's not as quick a factor. And you look and you're like, oh, they all got 3 firepower. Good, good, good. You know, and this thing is tiny now. Between the two factors, the bigger one for me is the victory point, the victory conditions factor in this game, which is really, I think this is an oddity among the systems. I don't recall having to count units in that way, but that's what the army morale rules appear to be based on. I've played with them before. I don't think I've ever hit where I had to worry about it as much. This is a horrendous blowout, and are we there? Are we not? I don't know. How the fuck can I tell? You know, I mean, seriously, how can I tell? I can count up routed and disordered units, I guess. So I've got, you know, I can do something like, okay, I'm +2, I'm even, I'm -2, I'm -3, -4, -5, -6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, +2, +3, +4, +1, 0, keep it at 0, keep it at 0. I'm at -2, okay? But I got to worry about those guys. I may actually be screwed. -2, not towards losing. -6, -8, -10, -11. Okay, so we're pretty close actually. We're at -11 over there. And then what's left here? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 7, 8, 9. And now I got to look and make sure there aren't any Prussians in there. I think actually I have just noted that we've broken the 1/2 point. At the end of this turn, I guess I'll deal with that if I'm still there. I should have noted it before, but again, that's the kind of counting you have to do to see. Now that's not going to end the scenario, but that is going to cause the army the first level of demoralization if I don't rally some units. Over here, I think I'm okay, so I'm not going to count these because there's not a lot of casualties here. Brunswick doesn't count, and this looks like less than half. But I mean, that's a painful kind of thing to have to figure out. Okay, I think I fired all my French, so I've got my Prussian fire coming back. Basically nothing did anything until I hit that, and then I was like, oh, I got something to think about. And then, oh, gosh, I'm pretty hammered. And it also turns out that the Prussians have probably broken Davout as well. So that's the, this is going to require a further morale check, I believe, on the army morale. And we're going to probably see it on both. I'm not going to be doing it right away. It's demoralization. When the army is demoralized, each unit in good unit order with at least a step loss makes a morale check. And then, and that's really the only cost to this. From now on, though, as long as they still are under that demoralization level, they've got an additional -1 to their morale. And that should actually count. They don't tell you when you check, do they? No, they don't really tell you when you check. I would guess at the beginning or end of a turn. Not just at the moment when it happens. But yeah. And those demoralization levels didn't go well. You can see even more of Davu's forces a little beaten up. I got to count, see if he's hit the desperate situation. I don't think Davu has, but over here it may have happened. That's all route, so those aren't adding to anything, but and we got routes here that aren't adding to anything, but we've thrown some additional counters in there, and we've seen some units that had taken a little bit of fire, but were still in good condition, demoralize. I highly doubt we're at the 2/3. But yeah, the demoralization level could get you to the desperation level immediately. And then you got to check again, I guess. Oops. The problem with this count is I can't just do it as a positive negative thing. I'm clearly over the negative line. You've got to count the total number of counters and the total number of damaged destroyed counters. Check against the 2/3. It is a really painful part of the system. I really don't like the mechanism for it. I'm not sure, what you would have otherwise, because any kind of track that tried to keep track of this or something would be a pain in the ass to keep up to date, and you'd end up counting all the units anyway. But I guess just knowing the base number would be helpful. The total number of counters that are available to that army. But that's really just a matter of counting once. He's actually a little closer to the 2/3 level. He's at like 13 out of 20, and over here we're at like 26 out of 49. There are a fair number of units that haven't taken any hits over here. I would say that you could probably kind of put both battles aside at this point and say, Davu's pretty hosed. He's not going to be able to overcome this. It is possible that he could still break the Prussians, though. I don't know how bad a shape they're in. They had a fair number of recoveries over here. Kind of fucked up and forgot to do my rally phase over here, but and did the problems instead, which it's hard to tell what that would have done. It probably would have saved a few of them, but fuck it. I'm happy to see the Prussians falling over there. So what does that mean? Let me take a look at what the main Prussian army is. So that looks like we've got 41. I don't know what this is, though. And that's kind of the problem, is I can't tell you. So let's see, 23. Okay, so this is counted in there. So I would say this is 41. These guys are part of that, I'm guessing, if they're on the board. So what that means is we'd be looking at 20 hits. We have almost nothing. 1, 2, 3, 4, no, 3, 4, no, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 hits. So yeah, we're in pretty good shape with the Prussians, and we're dealing Davu a really bad hand here. But on the other hand, Napoleon's winning this battle handily as well, and there may be enough time for some sort of combining of the maps. Somebody making it onto a different map. I don't know. Some pursuit-like charges here. This cav wasn't able to countercharge, and it got locked into a combat. It could have blown, but it would have still been attacked, so you don't want to get attacked when you're disordered. I swear I thought there was a rule that said you could just keep blowing continuously, but I wasn't able to find it when I looked for it, so screw it. Soul crossing through the woods, catching behind the attempted disengagement here. So we've got this combination of Murat's cav, which I could not move. Actually I could, because I'm going to melee, so I'm not going to. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I can move at half strength. 1, 2, 3, 4. Let's keep that a little below. The rest of Sewell's column trying to curve around here and bring its way around to finish off taking this town. Lon marching forward again, pursuit attack, trying to get here, and then he's supposed to pivot. That pivot puts him right into kind of Reuchel's path, so we may see a conflict there. Aguilera heading for his goal. Ney, you know, I'd love to give Ney more better orders to continue on, but he's tired, and I'm going to let him rest there. The Imperial Guard, I could definitely do something with them. They're fresh now. They rested this turn. But, yeah, that's, again, I don't have a target location. I could throw them here. Why don't I write Lefebvre some orders to go to Kleimrodstadt? Just seeing how well I'm advancing, I think that's going to be safe terrain. I'll make sure that they don't have orders to engage, so that I don't commit the guard. To talk at all about what's going on around Hassenhausen here. This is the Battle of Auerstaedt. This is the Battle of Hassenhausen. So much of my force is disorganized. A couple more units routed off the board. I'm not spending any movement points that I recover fatigue point. Definitely not optimal. I would love to move, get this up on the line, or fall back a little, or whatever. But fatigue rules say, nah, don't do that. And the cav charges are pretty damn effective. The firepower, not so much. You can see those units still there, but they're in a shitty location where they may have to like try to stand and just get wiped out. We're getting closer to winning the battle in terms of putting them into panic mode or whatever. Desperation morale. That doesn't sound like something that belongs in this era. We're at like 29 casualties and disordered right now, and with 49 we need to get that to like around 34, so it's getting pretty bad. You can also see I don't know, you can kind of see the movement happening at this point, where the big split is going on. And of course, all of this is just garbage and is running off the board at this time. And so is all that shit. I mean, Prussia is just hosed. It's just really a question of time. And, you know, the scenario is a time-based one. We're well within our time and might be able to get over to Auerstaedt in time to challenge the main Prussian army. However, Davout is not looking like he's in great shape either. What were my numbers on Davout? The Prussians are fine. Davout, geez, I have a D here. Davout has a total of 20 units. That means 14 is my number for 2/3. And it looks to me 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I don't think I'm worse off. 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. I'm one short wow, maybe I am kind of worse off. Did anything get disordered? Yeah, the square here got disordered. So I'm like one turn or 1 unit away from hitting desperation morale. And as far as I'm concerned, that essentially means our stat is over. So I think we may not be using the dual map linkage because, if the Prussian army drives Davout off the board, we're not going to have to stick around here. In fact, what we probably will end up seeing is both armies moving towards each other and kind of canceling each other out. And maybe there's a battle somewhere between Auerstaedt and Jena, but more likely, given the situation as it stands, the Prussians will actually pull back because this is a big portion of our overall force up here in a way that Davout is not, So we're looking at Hohenlohe and maybe Ruschel in a routed state, and Wilhelm's army is not in great shape. So I think we might just end up calling things without using the linkage at all. Yeah, there's almost nothing functional on the map. Hohenlohe's got 3 units. Ruschel has, looks like only 1, 2, 3, 4 units. That's his command. That's all he has on the board. He's got more coming, though, and that's the real kicker here, is that he has a chance to bring more forces on, and those forces are preventing the Prussians from having already completely collapsed. Was there something else I wanted to say? I don't know. Having trouble staying awake today. I know I started work and didn't get a lot of sleep because of last night, whatever. But I've had like 2 short naps already. Just really kind of a lethargy. I started reading the rules for Danzig, which is an interesting scenario, but unfortunately I can't really understand them until I see the map, and I got the map buried under these to make sure it flattens nicely, or maps. So, but that shows hints of the cool games from the Art of Siege. It's more intricate because it still has it basically uses a 2-map system. 1 map to handle any sorties or engagements outside the city, and then 1 to handle the siege works that looks very much like Lille or Sevastopol's maps, where you're using a minis type measurement system. I'm really kind of excited about that. I wonder what Hanau looks like. I don't know. I clipped the counters, but then, that just looks like a normal battlefield with just 1 map, yeah. I'm pretty sure Leipzig does not have a siege in it. Danzig is a siege. It's sort of like Dresden is not. Dresden was a field battle. Danzig, not enough troops were left behind or whatever, but it's kind of weird, I don't know, to see that technique used in another game, actually. Alrighty, enough chatter, I guess. Here, Hohenlohe is hoping that something survives out of all of this, that enough survives that he doesn't go into desperation right away, that Ruschel is able to intervene and maybe provide a screen for anything that is recovering to make its way up. The fatigue levels are so high, though, that, they're just at 1, but we've got 1 for fatigue, we've got a penalty for fatigue, and we've got a penalty for being a demoralized army. And I don't think we're going to recover from that demoralization. I think we're too beaten up and too likely to just lose most of those units. Over here, the Prussians are still continuing their attack, still continuing to, not recover our fatigue levels, because just a little bit more, and we push the French into desperation morale, which requires another check across the army and starts implementing more problems, and then we'd be able to drive them off the board. And that way, at least, you know, we'd get a victory at Auerstaedt, even though Jena is definitely a loss. The question is just how fast a loss is it, and you know what condition the French army is in, how much of the day it has to try to cut off Wilhelm's army. You don't think we have the time to make that transition. I don't remember how many turns it is. It's I don't remember if it's 3 turns or 3 hours. And that's kind of the issue. Yeah, it's 2.5 hours for the French to make it across. So that's what, 5 turns. 5 turns puts us to here, which means, you know, we might have a couple of turns to interact at most. There is still some time though, and if we could turn this into a victory against the forces at Jena and then finish off what remains after the fight with Davout, that's not a terrible result, I guess. Holding those Prussians are about 1 or 2 points away from a full break at this point. The damage that was done here was enough to push them there. I cheated a little in a bad way. Well, not in a way that kind of probably doesn't matter, which is some units that are going to rout off the board on the next Prussian turn. I checked morale checks on them, and they routed off early, but they're never going to get a chance to recover because this is the turn, so it would be here that they'd get it, and they would have routed off in time. So it got some clutter off the map is the net effect of it. And really those guys I could remove as well, all those double 5s up there. They've got no chance of making it. Over here, the French had their disaster, and I found they're at desperation morale now. And I found out something they did screw up, which is I rolled morale, and this is why some of these units are routing, for all units on the demoralization threshold. And it's not, it's each unit in good order and 1 step loss, which is somewhat easier to find because you don't have to paw under all the disordered units. And thus, a lot of the routing that's going on wouldn't have been happening. Since it's affecting both battlefields, I'm just saying, well, it's speeding up the process. It pretty much isn't going to make a difference on the battle, but it may mean that the French can intervene here faster, or the Prussians can move up and counteract that intervention faster, whatever. And the same thing happens here, although it's a little different, the wording choice. Here they say when the army is desperate, each unit, and then here they put in good order, even with no loss, but they put it in parentheses instead of without. But the parentheses helped me see, and I said, wait a minute, that's not even in good order, that's just each unit in good order. And that made me look back, and I realized I fucked up the other one. Again, that sped things up, which kind of sucks because part of me doesn't want the battle to speed up at this point. So that's gonna, I'm out of number chits that take me anywhere. So that's gonna put me to the 15 turn, which I'll put here and up here. And that'll be the French side of it. And, you know, yeah, there were definitely some fuck ups so far. I could call this and pretty much say, hey, it's over. The French won that Jena, the Prussians won Auerstaedt, and they should be pretty happy about that. But I haven't finished the rules for Danzig, and I'm not sure I want to do Danzig right away. I kind of want to do a train game or something. Something a little lighter. largely so that I can try to figure out how Danzig works when I have it kind of set up and look at it a little and fiddle around with it. Although maybe I'm best off just plowing straight through and taking a couple of days off. But I don't know. I got a lot of 18xx's that are piling up to play too, and a couple of other train type games. Alrighty. Has taken kind of a weird turn today. Nothing major, just the last couple of days I've been, I played a little bit yesterday, but I've been watching videos of a computer game. It's mainly a story-based game, and I was interested in it. It was on sale, and it will not, there was a demo, and it will not run at all reasonably on my machine. It might run on my wife's, but I don't want to deal with all that hassle. But since it's so story-based, you know, it's not quite a visual novel, choose your own adventure type thing, but it's pretty close to that. It's like, I've done a few of these before, and I'm cool with buying them, but in this case, I'm just watching someone else playing it. No commentary or anything, just pure the gameplay. So that's been eating up a lot of my time. I think largely because I know I'm close to the end of this, and I have no desire to read the rules. I've struggled with the rules for the Danzig scenario, and I also don't really want to read the rules to the 18xx that I pulled out. In part because I got the maps up here for the Danzig. I'm going to want to fiddle around with those, and that'll mean being in a different room for the 18xx, and I don't know, this is just an easier room right now. I don't know. Anyway, we're going to squeeze out half a turn at least, the French player turn. So over here, we are seeing some charges by Murat, which means his force is not moving because I'm going to degrade in fatigue levels already. Because, well, actually I can move half. All right, I'll do that. To keep the pursuit up. I made this mistake last time. 1, 2, 3, 4. Let's keep him somewhat in a safe place. Yeah, I made the same damn error last time. Oh, we'll charge that. Four, five, 6 is allowable. I didn't see I didn't see that I forgot to charge with this thing. Yeah. Okay. Most of my other units are moving half to preserve their fatigue levels. We've got Soul curving around. It's, you know, I'm unlimbering some guns to blow away that. There's not much here, right? It's all disorganized shit, and hopefully routing shit. Lon, nothing in his way, but he's got to screen these guys with the cav. I could have charged, but as long as you're not going to get close enough to the enemy that they can countercharge, it's probably better just to screen, even on the offensive like I am. I probably got to get some better rolls for Lon. I don't know if this makes that much sense anymore, although that is where the primary remaining force is, but I'd like to deal the coup de grace over here. Aguilar, or Aguilaro, or whatever, advancing slowly. He actually could have pushed a little harder, but his cav wasn't in range to neutralize these. I could have used Lon's cav to try to neutralize them. I would rather have better numbers in place there. Ney moving his forces up. The guard, they just got their orders, and they got a delay on them, so they're not moving where they're going. Napoleon's running over to go talk to Ney because I feel like I should be pushing over here, and maybe I can take some pressure off here. But Davout his army is, you know, in panic mode. There's nothing left except a couple guys in the village or town there. Might be able to recuperate some units, but, you know, the Prussians are in better shape overall. However, their fatigue levels are such that maybe they want to recover. Of course, giving Davout a chance to get back on his feet might be a worse thing than slowly advancing and keeping my fatigue levels where they are. All right, firing and such now. Hey, so, kind of mixed results. Over here, we got a couple of rallies, which are not a guarantee at all. I don't think it's pulling us out of the desperation, but I could look. What I see is that I have 4 units alive out of 20, or 4 in good shape out of 20. So I know that I'm not in good shape there. But over here, the French firing didn't really work. Counterfire, you know, the defensive fire blew me out of the water in a couple of cases. And we got basically no effects from it. But the charges worked. They, as you can see, sent things routed or off the map. We did take 1 casualty to the Cav, though, which kind of sucks. You know, the good chart can still hurt you. And that'll put it over to the Prussian side of the turn. I don't know if I'm going to play it tonight. I got like an hour and a half worth of this video game still to watch on the current thing it has. It's this really cool thing about cyborgs and stuff. And it's just really, really pretty. And no way I could run it on my machine. Here, Hohenlohe, a little confused because I don't think I took off my point. Doesn't move his forces. So, I'm sorry, not Hohenlohe, Wilhelm. Doesn't move his forces. Doing a couple cav charges on the rear. Davout's fleeing forces. But the main intention here is, let's try and get the fatigue level down instead. Let's not pursue too hard. See what Davout can manage, but he's so wrecked that we can recover a little bit. Not worrying about trying to recover stragglers. That's a hard process. I have disordered units that it seems a better idea to try to recover. Of course, disordered units can run off the board when you try to recover them, but let's forget about that for a little bit. Like, it's pretty likely. It's like having a lousy leader in great battles of history. Over here, Hohenlohe's situation, he froze all his units as well, because my feeling is that I am better off trying to improve my recovery chances than I am doing anything else with the forces that Hohenlohe had under his command. Yes, I have a couple of units back here that I could move and try to escape with, but they look pretty hosed, to tell you the truth. And trying to save this and whatever might rally that could come up with Rochel or that is near him seems more valuable. So I've actually dropped myself, so I no longer have a penalty for that. I'm not quite at desperation morale, so, you know, maybe I can piece something together. I don't know. Taking a side on Auerstaedt. The battle going this badly against Davout, and Davout's not going to get his title of this, that's for sure. I think the biggest factor to that was the existence of the Prussian cavalry in good order when we got out of the fog. when the battle really started in earnest, when Davout tried to push the attack. He probably should have stayed on the defensive at that point. And here's where the issue is. First of all, you could just obviate that whole problem and start this scenario when the main scenario starts and ignore the fact that there's like a prequel scenario that's not accounted for in the main scenario. And I see why that prequel wasn't accounted for. However, there are a few reasons, there are some real problems with that prequel scenario that don't reflect what the hell's going on. It's trivial for the French to win the prequel scenario by doing precisely what I did and not pressing an attack early on and not forcing Blücher to use his cav to charge your infantry in the fog and forming, you're hoping the French infantry with a high morale is able to form into squares and repulse that cav. Once that cav's all disordered, it's much, much harder to get it undisordered because Prussian morale isn't that great, because their leadership isn't going to really help too much with it. And the French could just advance. Now, what the hell would happen, though? Here's two of the problems with that. One is the victory conditions don't support it. So if you're trying to figure out, well, what should I do by the victory conditions? What I did was perfect. Form a defensive line, and the Prussians basically have no chance of winning the scenario. And as soon as they accept that, they're like, okay, well, I'll preserve my force then, which puts me in the situation where Auerstaedt is heavily weighted in favor of the Prussians at that point. The other, other than the victory conditions, the other factor is that troops show up here. So if the French somehow do push that way, something should happen to those troops. I don't know what. But I was actually afraid of pushing that way because of the arrival of those forces. You know what would be a good answer that might solve everything? Start the scenario in the fog, set these things up, and they are disordered until the turn in which they can first move in the main scenario. That makes them easy targets for the French. That makes it so that Blücher has to intervene with his cav, or else the French are going to shoot up the main Prussian army. That changes the whole dynamic of the situation. And that could have been worked into the victory conditions for the, opening guns in the fog, or whatever the fuck it's called. Without actually having to put the units there with something like there's victory points for each space you take or something, and not just be, well, have a French unit survive somewhere outside the town. What a stupid victory condition. The cav is not going to be able to dislodge a whole bunch of French squares. Because them nerds have guts. Anyway. Everything. I had to set up something like this or something. I don't know. This was a fucking artillery. I'm throwing it back here and doing this and taking the casualty on this. I fired some artillery fire at that thing. It's so hard for me to fucking tell the difference between the infantry and the or the cavalry and the horse artillery, to tell you the truth, from the backs of the counters. And I'd much rather see something. So here's the thing. The counters that I'm kind of used to don't show NATO symbols. They show something that looks clearly like, well, it depends. I think there is a slash across the back of the cav in the NBS series, for example. But they tend to show something that just pops out at you more. And a lot of the problem with this game is with the amount of information trying to be presented on these counters. And one of the pieces of information that's being presented is a flag in the middle of the counter. A flag which shows the nationality of the unit, something color should be sufficient for. We'll talk about that when we look at the Russians in Danzig. But that takes up a fair amount of the space. A whole bunch of numbers on each counter. Now the counters are, they're double sized though. They're double the size of normal counters, yet an amount of information that I find is capable of being presented in normal counters gets blurred and lost in these double-sized counters somehow. And I have real trouble understanding why that's the case. But some of it also has to do with simple graphics. These just look too much alike to me. A block that looks like it's long-wise and that looks like it can charge. I can see the difference, but it doesn't register when I'm moving through things quickly. And a lot of this system, a lot of the struggles that I've been having have to do with trying to look up unit designations, which are this, tiny little number, almost impossible for me to see on the back side of the counters. I have to flip the counters back over to the front to see it, where it's repeated. That's necessary because, honestly, the designation which is present below is just not as easy to understand as it is in other games presentation of a sort of a numerical designation. Fourth Corps 257. Okay, that doesn't sound too bad. That's going to be French, so it'll be here. So I look for Fourth Corps. Well, there's nothing marked Fourth Corps, but there's a Quatrième Corps. Instead of using the same designation that they use on the counters, they decide to write it all out. Okay. And what were we looking for? It was Fourth Corps 257? 257. Okay, so that would be, I guess, second column, second division, and 57. And it's not too hard. It really isn't. But it's so much easier to follow the one number that is really the index into the entire unit stream. So instead of having to do a couple of lookups to the page to find it, that additional number, though, is hard to read. So which one do I want to take? Well, these aren't trivial to read either, because again, so much information on the counter. It's just by giving me two ways of doing it, one of which is the historical accurate but more difficult to look up, or historical meaningful, and the other which is just this index into the counter mix. They've probably given up a little bit of space on the counter to be able to print things in a way that shows more information. And again, the differentiation between the cav and the artillery, I see this from a distance and it just looks like cav in column to me. Other games exemplify maybe making it more difficult. They don't show the horses dragging the cannons, maybe. Maybe they just show a limbered gun, It's just something that very quickly is much more clearly pops the information into your brain, so you don't make stupid mistakes that, are just like, geez, there's nothing technically wrong with the game rules-wise in this sense, and I should be able to see it, but it creates mistakes that are of the level that basically destroy the play experience. I'm having to jump something here or whatever. Yeah, the game's over, but we've had other cases of this shit. I gripe about this kind of stuff maybe in earlier versions of the game. I'm not sure. I'm not sure. It could be that, and I mean, I'm sure I did, but not as much. It could be that I was more willing to, I mean, I could have just been a nicer person back then. I'm not so sure. But it could also be I was so excited by the system and said, you know, the presentation is new to me. I understand I'm having difficulties with it. I'll give it a little bit of extra, you know, a little bit more tolerance. Could also be me physically. My eyesight's gotten worse, and the lighting is maybe not as good as it was in Phoenix when I was playing these games. It could be, although this wouldn't make sense with the Spanish one, but I don't remember being as thrilled with that as I was with the original AWEs or the Grognard version that I played. It could be that the Legion version is just somehow different. And I'll tell you, one thing that's definitely different from the Grognard version is there's a lot of color here. And that may be changing some things, but it also might be, you know, the way the counters are printed is just slightly different, causing a little bit more problem. Certainly the way the counters are different is or the way the counters are and the way the maps are is significantly different from the AWE versions. I remember the maps in the AWE versions being kind of ugly looking. These are not masterpieces by any means, but the maps are largely, you know, readable, etc., and they're not garish to the eye. I remember the AWE ones being garish to the eye. The Grognard ones were not garish, but they felt a little too washed out, being kind of like these faint tones, which you might end up saying you like better anyway, right? I'm always kind of torn between the when color is used, whether or not it's necessary is basically the issue. Now, in some cases, you go too retro for me. I was looking at one of the GDW Napoleonic games on BGG, and I'm like, oh man, I don't even know if I could play this. You know, it's like looking at some of I don't know, some of the older stuff from the 70s and whatnot. And here we're talking about something that came out at a period where printing and design work were just way ahead of what it looks like. GDW had a real issue with that, and I can kind of tolerate that with the Series 120 stuff, not so much when you're talking about something, you know, I don't know, that was more than $5 initially or something. I don't know. Anyway, now I've played the game a number of times. Yes, I'm not all that used to it, but you know, I don't have that first blush of, wow, I'm really loving this system, and okay, these are just little technical issues that I might be getting into. But there's also a deterioration in my own situation, and you know, a lot of us are getting older, and you see it in posts here and there where, you know, they want to play games that have, you know, this size hex but full counters that like with big numbers and whatnot. And I'm like, yeah, I get that. I thought my reading glasses would be enough, but they're not when you start crowding too much information. We'll see what happens when I look at the OCS, if that, you know, if that starts screwing with me. And actually, my prescription on the reading glasses part of my glasses is a little bit off right now. So, like, I've got a new prescription coming, or a new set of glasses coming with the better prescription, and that might help. But you know, that's again going to be a factor of life for everyone. You go a few years between glasses, and you're like, if you're at the bad end, the game shouldn't be unplayable. You know, it's not like I've not corrected it at all. Degree of flexibility that I find kind of interesting in this game. Not with the configurations, with the order system, in terms of once you've done 3 turns of something, you can just call an order off. That's kind of tempting towards Soul because my units are tired, but you know, I got to bring these things together up forward anyhow. So I probably will just keep my order to continue pressing down and put a little bit more pressure on the Prussians that are down there. And just I'm doing that sort of beginning of turn thing. So for example, I look here and I say, do I want to charge? This is the only cav charge that I have that's available. I mean, I could charge these cav, but cav versus cav charges are an iffy question. Here I'm charging dead men. They're running off the map. Let them go. I don't want to spend the fatigue on that. But I'm looking elsewhere to see, you know, hey, I might want to do some here. And I'll almost certainly want to launch a charge against these guys. Oh, there's a lot less cav here now that those artillery are showing up as artillery. To the line here on the Prussians, let me go over what happened. We had some firing. The square that was here got destroyed. Artillery got hit. The men ran away from the artillery. Not a whole hell of a lot else other than a heavier engagement here. Elan moving forward. Napoleon moved over to Ney to give him orders, but honestly, I think I still want Ney to rest. So the Guard is going to start moving next turn. Over here, Davout just sat still. He ran over, rallied another unit. He may not even have enough units that he can go beyond desperation morale. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 left on the board. Yeah, I think he can barely do it. I have him marked as 20 units. I may be wrong about stuff though, like the number of units, because, and this is the problem here, I've got this marked at 49 units total. Is that right? I don't know. It should run from 42 to 91. 42 plus 48 sounds like 90, which should be like 45, but I'm not getting that, right? So I counted total disorganized and dead units, and again, I may have thrown somebody in the wrong box or something, came to 33. Now I counted the units that were okay. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18. 18 and 33 is 51, which is not 49. That's a problem. When I look at this, 91 minus 42 is, I don't know what I'm doing number-wise. But I had come up with the decision that there's like, if there's 49, that's close to 48. Oh, that's 16. Yeah, I'm okay. I'm okay. The numbers still aren't working, but that's fine. I am still definitely okay because I came up with what? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. I gotta keep counting. 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18 units. Okay, I'm definitely okay, no matter what. I do my math wrong. But I am not sure that all these units are actually present. And I don't think there are any more Prussians coming. There might be something buried under there, but I don't think there is, which would, of course, skew my numbers. But yeah, you've got to do these crazy kind of like juggling arithmetic to figure out, hey, have I reached army morale levels? The 50-50 isn't too bad. But the 2/3 is tough, and that is when victory for this scenario occurs. It's going to come soon. I thought it actually had come this turn, but I was thinking, oh, 17 is my target number when actually it's 16. Why 17? Because 17 times 3 is 51. It's actually somewhere between 16 and 17. But here's the thing. I've got assuming my numbers are right? I've got 17 at least on there. I think I counted 18, I don't know. So we're all right. And that means we go over to the Prussian side of turn 16, and I scratch my head. Not really sure what I'm doing, because this kind of mental, mechanical type shit, having to juggle the arithmetic, whatever, that just fucking kills me. Now, the routing units leaving the board, they're not going to decrease my current situation. What they do, though, is mean I'm not getting those units back ever. Right, over here at Auerstaedt, well, at Hassenhausen, one Prussian cav more or less broke almost the entirety of the remainder of the Davout force. The only thing is, it's hard to pull them out of the town, mainly because it's hard to get hits on them that cause them the morale checks that they'll fail, and that'll cause domino effects, whatever. But this battle is over. And over here, the Prussians just lost attempting to withdraw from here, fire over here, whatever. They lost down to desperation morale. This battle is over. Is there time for another, time for some kind of push through here? Maybe, maybe not. I'm not going to do it because both battles have been resolved before there's anybody heading off map. So I'm going to call it right here. We had a French defeat at Auerstaedt, but a victory on, I guess, 1330, that's 130. And if we look at the Jena map, that is a substantial French victory over Hohenlohe. Now, I made a few errors with the routing. May have made the army a little more fragile in both cases, but I don't think much. What it really came down to was maybe there were some rally chances that I didn't get because some units routed earlier than they should have. Basically, things that I was checking the morale for disordered units instead of for disordered units to rout when the army transitioned its morale status. And that was definitely a bigger effect over on Jena, although those units were less likely to be able to rally than anything Davout lost. That might have sped things up just a teeny bit, but not much probably. And yeah, we saw this sort of maneuver to cut the army in half. That may or may not have mattered much, but it definitely worked out in a very pretty fashion where, it's preventing the Prussians from being able to exit towards Auerstaedt and thereby help protect it. Do I see any point in pushing on? Not really. Honestly, I think the Prussian army finishes off Davout and then heads off to wherever, probably northeastward, which is towards Württemberg's forces. The real question is the Ruschel forces. There's still a few of them left after the rout. Got a nice little cluster of units that did not rout or did not disorder up here. But, he can't really push his way back, so I feel like he's cut off from that Auerstaedt and has to push back. The Prussian army is not destroyed by any means. The fact that the main army was victorious kind of means that we're in much, much better shape than the historical situation, even though a faster victory occurred here. Like I said, I had some definite difficulties, not just now, but I had some definite difficulties both absorbing the newness of, relearning the system, basically, in terms of every time I deal with the integrated combined arms type situations in the Napoleonic era especially, there's a hurdle. And this system handles things, every system handles things differently. It's not something that's handled in a standard fashion across different systems that are attempting to represent it. And this is the point where the combined arms is probably at its peak. Artillery has advanced to a point where it's stronger than it's been at any other point in history. But infantry is still back. There's some techniques that the French introduced, especially in, Frederick's period with the linear formations, also had some techniques that advanced. But in terms of the actual technical tool, those muskets are about the same as they were at the beginning of the 18th century. So you're not really seeing a huge difference in terms of the capability of infantry. Cavalry, what's the big advantage with cavalry? Well, it's beginning to operate in using techniques that are, tactical systems essentially, that are just really, really effective at, forcing the infantry into squares so that they're more vulnerable to the firepower of artillery and even other infantry. So there's sort of this balance throughout. The Cav has the maneuverability to get behind guns and threaten them. It's got the power to run over guns if need be, sometimes. It doesn't do well against squares in general, although it's not an absolutely hopeless function to bring it. So Cav is really reaching its strongest point at this point in history. And the means of expressing that across different games has been so different to show the capabilities of, you're in range to be charged by Cav, what happens to you? So anyway, that's one factor in this particular system and any Napoleonic game that I've played, really, that goes into any detail. That's always going to be somewhat painful. And some of it is a pain in terms of having to remember game state factors. As units are moving, other units you're rolling combat in the midst of movements and stuff like that. So there's a lot of weird stuff that showing that powerful cavalry tends to inflict on Napoleonic games. On top of that, though, the looseness of the rules, especially when applied to the specific rules to the scenario, which haven't undergone multiple revisions the way the core system has. But the looseness even of the core system makes this a difficult game to approach at any point, a difficult system to approach. And then I was finding some difficulties with the representations on the counters. Too many different numbers, too much space being, too much of the counter space being taken up by numbers or symbols so that they don't pop into your brain as well as they should. In terms of the battle, I'm a little disappointed, although I understand the why, and I explained it, I think, earlier on this video, why Davout failed so badly. It's because I played that prequel scenario, and it doesn't have fair victory conditions that lead you into the real scenario. And there's no real means of linking them together that's expressed in the rules, although I'm seeing glimmers of how I would write that straight through from 6 a.m. Scenario at Auerstaedt. Jena, did the Prussians collapse a little too easily? You know, they feel a little too fragile, and some of that may just be adding the fatigue roll. It just makes both armies more fragile, you know? And there were times when I felt like I was pressing the French a little too hard here. But I'm also like, I want to get this done quickly, not because I hate the game, rather because I've got another battle to get to. I don't just have as much time as I want. I can hear the guns back there. I know that there's something going on, and I want to break the battle at Jena. Is that as historically accurate a situation? I don't know. I don't know if Napoleon felt as pressured. I feel like the victory that Davout had was something shocking. I don't think he ever, I don't think during the course of the battle he ever was thinking, I got to go save Davout. You know? I think he thought he was facing the Prussian army, or it was coming to him the whole time, and that Davout was maybe just tying up some forces while he could win the major battle. Anyway, that's it for this one. I don't know what I'm doing next. It's either going to be Danzig or something that's not a war game. And that really kind of depends on how much I can assimilate the information for Danzig. It has a lot of specific rules. It has basically a whole new game system and modifications to this game system because of the way it works. And I'm finding it really, really painful to figure that out. But maybe it'll be easier once I have some maps and some pieces to look at. If it's not, I don't know. I don't know what happens. I don't know if it's a wise idea to play something else. Anyway, that's it for this. Cheerio and all that. Just for shits and giggles, because I know I've been discussing this thing for a while. I've turned it the other way around. It wasn't charging, just like it doesn't charge when it's face up the other time. Maybe I've got to rotate it regularly. I don't know what's going on with it. But yeah, maybe I've tried that before and decided that wasn't really helping. I don't know. But the connection was not working any better than it's been working when it's face up like I have it. It had been working pretty damn well, so I don't know.